I am honored to introduce our next speaker, David Holliday. We are fortunate to have David speaking. He's the inaugural director of Washington Jefferson College's Center for Ethical Leadership, which was established in the fall of 2021. As a director, he works with faculty to develop and integrate opportunities to learn about ethics and practice leadership into students' academic studies. He also collaborates with the Division of Student Life to develop programming that advances learning in ethical leadership through student organizations, athletics, and other service activities and experiences. He also serves as an instructor of philosophy at the college. Prior to recently joining W&J in 2022, he held the position of director of the Jackson Family Center of Ethics and Values at Coastal Carolina University, where he also served as a lecturer in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies. He has received technical awards and fellowships from the University of Chicago, Coastal Carolina. He holds a BA in psychology from Oxford University, an MSc in philosophy from Edinburgh University in Scotland, and a PhD in philosophy from the University of Chicago. Today he's going to talk about Aristotle's theory of friendship and how it relates to the development of ethical professional relationships. Thank you.
All right. Can you all hear me okay? Hello. So the first thing I want to do is thank our host today, Grossman, Yannick, and Ford, for inviting me. It's really great to have a chance to share some of the philosophical ethics that I'm passionate about and that I really enjoy with such a large group of professionals. And in particular, I'd like to give some thanks to Mary Lou Harrison, who guided me and helped me through the whole process of setting this up. If there's one group of professionals who need more hand-holding than any other, it's academics, and I'm one of them. So thank you very much, Mary Lou, for your patience and your support through the process. So very quickly, because the introduction covered a fair amount of this. Let me go back one here. This is me. I look pretty much like I do in the shot. So I'm a philosopher. My interests are in moral philosophy or ethics, the philosophy of human rights, and in ethical leadership. I moved to Pittsburgh last year, late last summer, after working in South Carolina for about 6 years at Coastal Carolina University. And down there, I was the postdoctoral ethics fellow and then the director of the Jackson Family Center for Ethics and Values, which is a small ethics center located in the Humanities College, which had an ethical leadership scholarship program. I joined W&J, Washington and Jefferson College, last fall, where I've been hired as the founding director of the new Center for Ethical Leadership. In that role, let me get the college up. Where are we at? Ding. There we go. In that role, I support ethics education across the curriculum. I teach courses in ethics and moral philosophy, and I'm currently designing the ethical leadership program. This will be a new 4-year-long program of educational and practical developmental experiences taken by all W&J students, which is designed to make them effective, values-based practitioners of ethical leadership. People who live with uncommon integrity and are able to make a substantial contribution to the common good through their professional careers and their lives of responsible citizenship and service. We will be the first college in North America to have a program exactly like that. So W&J is a very exciting place to be as an ethics center director, and I'm glad to be working there. All right, so let's get on to our topic for today. Here is the great man himself, or his head anyway. That's Aristotle. And today I want to talk you through Aristotle's theory of friendship. Aristotle gives a taxonomy, a sort of categorization of kinds of friendship in his most famous ethical work, the Nicomachean Ethics. This book is a collection of his lectures that he gave at the Academy in Athens, which was written down by his students. It's one of the great works of Western philosophy. Aristotle's theory of human flourishing, of practical rationality, and of character, of virtue and vice, was the predominant and standard view in Western culture from the late classical period, the Roman Empire, right up until the 17th century. It was the standard view, and it's recently been revived. Over the last 25 to 30 years, Aristotelian ethics has been revived as one of the main contenders for kind of contemporary moral theory. One of the reasons philosophers like me love Aristotle's work is because he is such a systematic thinker. He's very good at arranging and ordering our ideas in a way that helps us make better sense of the world, our understanding of the world, and of ourselves. His approach is to take a large, complex, messy thing like knowledge, society, good and evil, to carefully cut it up into its working parts, and then to explain to us how the individual pieces hang together and work with one another in the whole. He's kind of like one of those engineering geniuses who can take apart anything and fix it and put it back together, except he works with abstract ideas, concepts and understanding, instead of with clocks or computers or cars. In this talk, I will explain Aristotle's theory of friendship, or friendships, say why I think it's helpful and useful and correct, and then, right at the end, turn around and apply it to a kind of friendly relationship which many of us benefit from and engage in through our professional careers, which is the relationship of mentor to protege, the activity of mentoring a junior. Aristotle starts his account of friendship by noting that pretty much everyone wants to have friends. Rich people, poor people, young people, old people, we all benefit from friendship relationships, and we all desire some human relationships of this kind in our lives. However, he says, there are also a few open and tricky questions about friendship. In particular, these two questions. Can wicked people be friends? And are there different kinds of friendship? Spoiler alert, the answer to the second question is yes. There are at least 3 basic kinds, and they're more complicated mixed kinds. And the answer to the first question is kinda. They kind of can, but not the best sort of friendships. So what is friendship? Aristotle gives a very broad definition of this concept, which catches up a wide variety of kinds of human relationships, some of which we wouldn't nowadays naturally call friendships. For example, Aristotle views the relationship between parents and children as a kind of friendship. Now, I love my parents and I love my children, but I don't think of them as friends in the sort of contemporary standard English sense of the term. I'm going to give you Aristotle's definition in a second, but I just want to note that it may seem artificial or even mistaken to you at first sight, but once we carefully follow it out and we get the whole account sort of on the table and in our hands and apply it to our lives and experiences, I believe it's surprisingly illuminating. It captures a lot of what is true and significant about the social relationships which we value in our lives and the ethical aspects of those relationships. So even if the account seems weird or wrong or distorted at first, please try to hold off on judgment until you've heard the whole thing. So here's the definition. Aristotle defines a friendship as any mutual or reciprocal relationship which is acknowledged as such by both parties. So it's a two-way street where both friends know they're in the relationship, in which some real or apparent good is exchanged. So this theory isn't just about friendship in the sense of buddies and BFFs or mates. It covers a great many social relationships, personal, familial, professional, and civic. Here's some of the kinds of things that can count. It includes acquaintances, romantic partners, but also business partnerships, Greek life bigs and littles, workmates, fellow congregants, right? So as you saw on the previous slide, Aristotle categorizes or classifies human friendships by the kind of good, the kind of benefit or value that is exchanged in them. For him, that is what the friendship is about. You might think of it as the coinage or currency of the relationship, what each party gets from one another. That makes friendship sound very transactional and essentially self-interested. That's a good first response to have. But again, please hold off on judgment until we've got the whole account into view, because it's actually remarkably modern and insightful once we've gone through the whole thing. Aristotle tells us that friendships can give us one of 3 kinds of benefit, 3 kinds of good: use, pleasure, or goodness. I'm going to take you through each benefit, starting from the most basic and crude and the weakest form of friendship, working our way up to the richest and finest form of friendship at the end. So the first benefit that we can get from a friendship is use. That means anything of functional value. Stuff that's helpful, valuable, beneficial for us. That could be money, information, influence, political connections, clout, all of those things. Aristotle gives two examples to illustrate this. One is two people in a binding legal contract, so a sort of business relationship. The other is guest and host, and this one rings a little funny for a contemporary audience. The background there is that for the ancients, there was a basic duty of hospitality. Anytime a stranger presented themselves at your house needing shelter or food or water, it was your responsibility and your duty to give them shelter. And so when a guest presented themselves at your house, it gave you an opportunity to enact your responsibility, your civic responsibility, and thereby sort of enhance your reputation. So there's the sort of two-way use street. More contemporary examples are business partners, study mates, collaborators, contractors, colleagues in a professional network. This is a weak kind of friendship, and Aristotle makes no bones about that. It is based purely in mutual or reciprocal self-interest. As Aristotle puts it, those who love each other for their utility do not love each other for themselves, but in virtue of some good which they get from each other. Right? This also means that use friendships are very contingent and shaky, as Aristotle puts it. Now, the useful is not permanent, but is always changing. Thus, when the motive of the friendship is done away, the friendship is dissolved, inasmuch as it had existed only for the ends in question. And the next quote says the same thing in other words. To illustrate this, consider study mates in a college class, right? Two students in a class spend some time together outside of class fairly regularly to help one another with assignments, to share class notes, and they both benefit at the end of the course, if the relationship has gone well, by getting a better grade, right? But at the end of the semester, when they're not in class anymore, maybe the relationship just dissolves. It goes away, and they don't spend any time together anymore. Of course, they'd say hi to one another if they pass each other in the halls, right? But the relationship in terms of actually spending time and taking care of one another goes away. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? No one's abused or taken advantage of here. It's a simple give and take. It's a reciprocal exchange of information and access and knowledge. And when the benefit isn't there anymore, there's no need for the friendship to persist. There's no need for the friends to stay together. So this is a weak and contingent and shaky form of friendship. It is the weakest kind that Aristotle will give us. And as he points out, friendships based purely on use, when they persist over a longer time, quite often get poisoned in a certain sort of way. As he puts it, the friendship of utility is full of complaints, for as they use each other for their own interests, they always want to get the better of the bargain and think they've got less than they should and blame their partners because they do not get all they want and deserve. To put that in sort of terms of virtue and vice, these kind of friendships very often get eroded or undermined by the common vice of greed, what Aristotle will call pleonexia, which is the desire to have more than your fair share, the tendency to underestimate how much you get and overestimate how much you give. So a use friendship is a very defective, derivative form of friendship. It's just an exchange of goods where each party is purely in it for themselves. And there's nothing other than mutually aligned self-interest to keep the relationship going. The second and slightly more elevated kind of friendship that Aristotle presents to us is the friendship of pleasure. In the pleasure friendship, what is exchanged is something experiential. So you can think of people whose company you enjoy, people whom you engage in entertaining banter or smack talk with, people whose sense of humor you share, people who share your taste for obscure Star Wars references or certain kinds of art, people you find interesting, people you find attractive. Aristotle's example here is young people in puppy love, sort of infatuation, a mutual crush. Other contemporary examples might be golf or other hobby buddies, hiking partners, drinking mates, fantasy league participants, excluding the commissioner usually. This kind of friendship is a bit more human and a bit closer to real friendship, or what we think of today when we use the word friends. It has more to do with the other person themselves, because you're attracted to their sense of humor, their wit, their attractive personality or their physical profile, and not, as in a purely use-based friendship, something entirely external to them, their money, their connections, their influence. But pleasure friendships are also fairly contingent and shaky. In part, this is because pleasure friends can enjoy different aspects of the relationship. So you might have one friend who enjoys playing the clown and another friend who enjoys being amused. So there's a difference in the form of pleasure that is exchanged. But also, as Aristotle says here, these friendships are only incidental. For it's not as being the man he is that the loved person is loved, but as providing some pleasure. Such friendships then are easily dissolved if the parties do not remain like themselves. So what's Aristotle saying here? He's saying that pleasure friendships are not very stable over time because in the first place, they're still basically self-interested. You're in it for what you can get out of it. And secondly, because people change. And as we change, the company and entertainments we seek changes. I mean, think about the friends you had in middle school, the friends you had in high school, the friends you had in college, the friends you had in your 20s, the friends you have in your mid-40s. They may stay the same some of the time, but a lot of those relationships will wax and wane, and some of them might drop off altogether. You can think of fair weather friends here, or how puppy love often can't survive that initial popping of the bubble when you get out of the infatuation, right? In a pleasure friendship, both parties are still in it for what they can get, to have fun or enjoy themselves. And when that goes away, the friendship or the crush may just fizzle out. Aristotle notes that anyone, including wicked people, may have these first two kinds of friendship, right? Even the wicked and the corrupted have interests and have enjoyments. As he puts it, for the sake of pleasure or utility then, even bad men may be friends of each other, or good men of bad, or one who's neither good nor bad may be a friend to any sort of person, but for their own sake, clearly, only good men can be friends. For bad men, this is the bit I've cut off the slide, do not delight in each other unless some advantage comes of the relationship. So at their core, these first two kinds of derivative or defective friendship, the basic kinds, the cruder kinds, are based in self-interest. Mutually aligned self-interest is all there is beneath them. This is how it is, I think, for a lot of us in many of our casual and even professional relationships. So if I think about how things are with me and my faculty colleagues at W&J, those relationships, professional relationships, tend to assume a kind of rough reciprocal equality between the parties. If one person always puts in more or goes the extra mile, while another always takes out more or does less, eventually the goodwill underneath the relationship erodes, and some of the trust and respect and mutuality that you need to have a long-term relationship with somebody can break down, right? In that case, one party might feel that they're being taken advantage of. And it can take significant work to rebuild a relationship from that point. All right, next slide. Finally, the real thing. This is the real deal, the goodness friendship. For Aristotle, goodness has the sense of having virtue. It is goodness of moral or ethical character. Goodness friendships are based on each friend recognizing and admiring the fineness or nobility of the other's character, regarding them as humble, honest, diligent, brave, kind, generous. This is friendship between two parties who respect, admire, and value one another, may even cherish one another. It's also the first form of friendship of the three, which is based on love. As Aristotle puts it, love and friendship therefore are found most, and in their best form, between good men, between good people. The friendship between decent people of good character is, Aristotle tells us, the perfect or ideal form of friendship. This is the real deal. The other two kinds are sort of derivative, degenerate forms of friendship. Goodness friends are friends who love one another as they are, for who and what they really are. And Aristotle's clear that this is the best kind of friendship by a country mile. And he gives us two reasons for this. First, because a goodness friendship gets you all of the benefits possible in human relationships. You get all of the benefits of use, and you get all of the benefits of pleasure. Goodness friends provide these benefits to one another. They help each other out in a tight spot. They give each other connections, things like that. They enjoy one another's company. They admire one another. But both parties in a goodness friendship also get moral or ethical benefits from the relationship. It actually makes them better people. by improving their characters. And I'm going to stop and explain why a little bit down the line in a minute. The second reason Aristotle gives us to think that this is the best or perfect or ideal kind of friendship is because it is the stablest, the most reliable and resilient, and the strongest kind of friendship, the most powerful, the most highly valued of the bunch. This is because friendships are based in moral character, and moral character is stable over the time, sort of written into the definition of a character trait, and across situations, and because goodness friendships tend to grow and develop and deepen over time. Let me explain why. In this passage that I'm about to read out, Aristotle points out a sort of virtuous spiral, an upwards moving spiral in a goodness friendship. Let me read out the quote and then explain what he's saying. For those who are friends on the ground of virtue are anxious to do well by each other, since that's a mark of virtue and of friendship. And between men who are emulating each other in this, there cannot be complaints or quarrels. No one is offended by a man who loves him and does well by him. If he is a person of nice feeling, he takes his revenge by doing well by the other. So what is Aristotle saying here? What is revenge by being nice? It's a strange idea. Think here of a relationship between two decent, good people, each of whom respects and admires the other. Imagine that one of the friends does a favor for another. They miss seeing an important live sporting event to help their friend move house or to attend their friend's baby shower. Seeing this, the friend who is helped, who receives the favor, will be moved to want to make a sacrifice or help out or go the extra mile for their friend the next time the opportunity arises. Or just to take a slightly different example, say one friend sets an example through their personal activities that the other finds inspirational. So she's so busy with work and home life, but I just found out she gives up one Saturday, a whole day a month, to go and do math tutoring at the local middle school, right? Seeing that, seeing your friend do this might inspire you to seek out an opportunity to volunteer or engage in charity or service work. So there's a slight move up. But then the first friend, the one who is the original inspiration, sees their friend working hard, making changes to their life, expressing their aspiration to be better or do more good, and they in turn are inspired by this. So in this way, two goodness friends can ratchet up one another's level of goodness over time through inspirational and aspirational friendship. They take it in turns to uplift or motivate or elevate one another. So as well as just being there for one another, because we love our friends, we want to help them out in a tough spot, we enjoy being with them, goodness friends actually exert a mutually positive influence on one another's ethical character. You could call this a kind of ennobling or elevating moral peer pressure. Here's a quote to sum it up. Perfect friendship is the friendship of men who are good and alike in virtue, for these wish well alike to each other qua good, and they are good themselves. Now those who wish well to their friends for their sake are most truly friends, for they do this by reason of own nature and not incidentally. Therefore, their friendship lasts as long as they are good, and goodness is an enduring thing. Okay, so that is Aristotle's taxonomy of friendships in its basics. I think it's very illuminating, I think it's helpful, and I think that the key difference to note is that the first two kind of friendships are based on a mutual exchange of a good received, something that each friend gets, whereas the goodness friendship, for the first time, is an exchange of something given. It is an exchange more like love than self-interest. And this comes out in Aristotle's description of love, which to me, reading this, more than 2,000 years later, is remarkably modern. I want to read out the quote. Real friendship, Aristotle says, seems to lie in loving rather than being loved, as is indicated by the delight mothers take in loving. For some mothers hand over their children to be brought up, and so long as they know their fate, they love them and do not seek to be loved in return if they cannot have both, but seem to be satisfied if they see them prospering. And they themselves love their children, even if these children, owing to their ignorance, give them nothing of a mother's due. So what's Aristotle saying here? Aristotle is saying that it is a mark of love that it is altruistic, that it is focused on the interests, the benefit, the well-being, the growth and development of the other. And his example of this is that it makes sense for a loving mother to give up a child for adoption and be happy knowing that the child leads a good life, whether or not they ever get anything back in return other than that knowledge. Even as in Aristotle's example, where the child doesn't know the mother, right? So I just want to sort of leave that there. One small complication that I think we should mention here is that there are mixed kinds of friendships, and these come of two varieties. Firstly, there can be a mixture in the sort of identities of the friends. Young people can be friends with old people, the rich with the poor, Southerners, Northerners, Christian, Muslim, pro-amateur. But the other kind of mixture that we should just be aware of, because it does happen quite a lot in real human relationships, is in the coinage of the friendship or what is exchanged. You can have a relationship where one friend gets use and the other gets pleasure. Think of, say, a stand-up comedian who you're a fan of. You go to their shows, they're doing it as a job, they take your money, you get to enjoy the show, right? So there can be mixtures between the different sort of coinages of friendship. That's the model in its basics. I think it's correct, basically. I think it's quite illuminating. I think it's partly useful because it just helps us be intentional and deliberate and conscious about the nature of our friendships, and so to not go into them with confused or mistaken expectations and avoid some of the confusion and disappointment that comes from mistaken expectations. But what I want to do in the last part of the talk here is to try and show the value of Aristotle's model by putting it to work on an important kind of professional relationship, and one that I think is at the center of ethical leadership, which is the relationship between mentor and protege. What does it mean to be a mentor or a protege? Let's just get a definition up on the board. A mentor is an experienced person who supports the development of a new or junior person. A professional who provides advice, help, support, and training someone who's less experienced or new to an organizational career. And we'll just do this in the professional context today. A protege, sometimes called a mentee or a junior or an understudy, is just the recipient of such support. To put it simply, in professional context, the mentor is the big, the protege is the little. Mentoring can sometimes be a formal professional responsibility. It's quite often, though, more of an informal thing. That depends on your particular role, the organizational culture of the place where you work, and the context of the particular relationship you're in. In Japan, where my wife comes from, the mentor-mentee relationship is an extremely common social relationship. Everyone has a set of senpais or mentors above them from school, from their athletics team or their club activities, from their work, and everybody has a set of deishis or proteges below them. And these relationships last over a long swathe of people's lives. So my wife is still in contact with her middle and high school senpais, and she asks them for advice when she's got, you know, big decisions to make about sort of career and family stuff. This sort of mentor-protege relationship is baked into Japanese social structure, which is quite traditional and quite hierarchical, based on seniority, based on age. I think it is helpful to see the mentor-protege relationship as a kind of goodness friendship. And I think that Aristotle's model helps us to think clearly and well about what it means to be a good, supportive, helpful, encouraging, challenging, instructive, successful mentor. I should also like to just pause here and note that the mentor-protege relationship sits right at the heart of transformative and servant approaches to leadership. These are two of the most prominent and attractive approaches to ethical leadership in practice today, and I know that our hosts today, Grossman, Yannick, and Ford, are, as an organization, deeply committed to the practice of servant leadership, and I'd like to recognize and applaud that commitment here. I personally view ethical leadership and mentorship as almost coextensive. To be an ethical leader a lot of the time, for a lot of people, just is to act as an inspirational, supportive, and fruitful mentor to one's juniors and successors, as well as to live and to act well, to act with integrity and with values, which is in part what mentorship is, because that's setting an example to your proteges. Robert Greenleaf, the originator of servant leadership, mentions mentors and mentoring at various places in his written work, but in particular, he makes sure to give special mention to one particular person's mentor, which is Thomas Jefferson. This is a passage from The Servant as Leader that I'd just like to read out to you. As a young man, Thomas Jefferson had the good fortune to find a mentor, George Wythe, a Williamsburg lawyer whose original house still stands in the restored village. George Wythe was a substantial man of his times, a signer of the Declaration of Independence and a member of the Constitutional Convention. But his chief claim to fame is as Thomas Jefferson's mentor. It was probably the influence of mentor and understudy, as Jefferson studied law in Wythe's office, that moved Jefferson toward his place in history and somewhat away from his natural disposition to settle down at Monticello as an eccentric Virginia scholar. The point of mentioning George Wythe is that old people may have a part to play in helping the potential servant as leader to emerge at his optimal best. And what I want to point out about this passage, and I think it's a vital insight that Greenleaf gives us, is that mentorship not only builds professionalism and excellence, gives proteges skills, capacities, certifications, helps them get promotions, but it also builds leadership. There's a mounting body of evidence, and I'm not going to get into the evidence here, that young people today have a strong desire to be mentored. There's an appetite for mentorship in young professionals, starting professionals. They are particularly attracted to mentorship characterized by accountability and empowerment. Those seem to be the two things that young proteges rate most highly. Let me say why I think Aristotle's model is a good fit for a mentor-protege relationship. There are two reasons for this. Firstly, I think that the mentor-protege relationship is more about giving than about getting. There is a kind of asymmetry here, right? The mentor gives advice and help, the mentee generally takes it. So in some cases, this might be a sort of mixed relationship. However, I genuinely think that when the relationship is healthy and good, both parties benefit from it. And I'm going to explain why shortly. And secondly, I think we should factor into our understanding of what is given and what is received in the mentor-protege relationship, that idea out of Greenleaf, the idea of paying it forwards. A good protege will partly show their gratitude and respect and appreciation for their mentor by doing a good job, by being an excellent professional, being productive, right, making the department look good. But they'll also partly show their appreciation and respect by in turn becoming a good mentor to their own juniors, by taking up and continuing the tradition of support, nurture, and training that they received. In this sense, and this is just a personal comment, and this isn't Aristotle's thought, but I find this a lot like parenting. I have two kids. I've got a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old at home. They run me ragged. It's Halloween week, so it's been a long week. I hope that my kids treat me okay when I'm elderly and dependent on them. But I hope more that if they choose to have kids, which I hope they will, because it's the only way I'm getting grandkids, they will become good parents and enjoy giving their children love just as much as I have. A little bit like the mother who gives up her child for adoption in Aristotle's example. If I had to pick between my children taking care of me when I'm elderly and my children having and loving their own children, I'd pick the latter option in a heartbeat. Right? It is just what I want for them. I want them to experience the same thing that I've experienced, which is to give love. Right? Again, that seems to me sort of Greenleaf's intuition and his insight about Wythe and Jefferson. It's not just that Jefferson made Wythe look good, but that Wythe could impart the leadership, the mentoring that he gave to Jefferson onto Jefferson and help transform him into a servant leader in his own right. The second reason that I think this is a good fit or a good match with between the mentor-protege relationship in a professional context and Aristotle's theory of a goodness friendship is because the mentoring relationship is only possible between people who basically respect and trust one another, i.e. between people who recognize one another as professionals and value one another as human beings. So on the protege side, we don't take advice from people that we don't trust. We need to trust in somebody's expertise and their knowledge. We need to trust that they're on our side, looking out for our best interests, i.e. they're oriented towards our success and growth, to trust them and take their advice. And we certainly don't share our concerns, confide the challenges or problems we're facing, or seek the advice of people whom we don't trust and respect. And on the mentor side, people don't give good advice, especially that hard to hear and difficult to swallow advice, which can be some of the most important advice we get in our professional careers, to juniors who we don't rate, respect, or value. You have to at least respect a protege's nascent professionalism, their serious commitment to becoming excellent practitioners of the craft, to want to invest significant time and energy into their development. One common form of trust that we have in our juniors is the expectation of sort of loyalty and gratitude from them, that when we invest time and energy into their growth and development, they'll not only take our guidance in good faith, but also use the development that this guidance yields to contribute to our shared endeavor, to become more productive workers for a department, right, to become better at their job. Another way of putting this, Aristotle's way, is that the mentor-protege relationship is only possible between two people of good character. And here we see that although you can have professional relationships which are purely functional, just based on use, or purely based in pleasure, just fun or entertaining, those things aren't really what mentorship is about. These casual, contingent professional relationships often lack the deeper basis of mutual admiration and regard that's needed for a long-term and effective and productive relationship of nurture, encouragement, challenge, and support. In closing, I'd like to just run through the last bit of Aristotle's theory and talk about the benefits of a mentoring relationship, sort of motivate you to think more about who you're mentoring, how you're mentoring, and what everyone's getting out of that relationship. The mentor gives the protege all three kinds of good, right? Use, you get advice, guidance, feedback, someone to challenge you, professional contacts, opportunities for professional development, promotions, things like that. Pleasure, the mentor will at least the protege will at least respect their mentor as a professional. Hopefully they will admire their skills or abilities. They should be comfortable in sharing challenges that they face and coping with them. And hopefully you'll just, enjoy each other's company. And finally, virtue. In the professional context, this means skills, competencies, excellences in the practice of the craft, but also there's the possibility of imparting personal or ethical virtue here as well, helping somebody to become more diligent, more honest, more brave. That side of the relationship is fairly easy to see, but what does a mentor get out of the relationship? Well, for use, I think it's fairly straightforward. You can count on your proteges. You can trust them. You can consult them. As they become better at the practice of the craft, they should become more productive, more efficient, more creative, more inventive. That should help team performance. They may even know something new or something different that can be of use to you, right? It's also clear enough, I think, on the point of pleasure. Mentors should respect their juniors, should enjoy their company, or at the very least enjoy working with them as a junior colleague or fellow professional, right? But I think this is trickier to see in relation to virtue. And we're just thinking about virtue in the sense of practical excellence within your professional identity here, although I do think the model also goes out into wider ethical virtue. How does a mentor become a better professional? Through the practice of mentorship. I think there are two ways for this. Firstly, teaching people is a way to deepen your understanding and your expertise. When you explain things to other people, especially inexperienced folks, juniors, newbies, you thereby come to understand them better yourself, because the process of breaking things down, simplifying, giving clear explanations, models and illustrations or examples, that process itself strengthens our grasp on ideas and deepens our understanding. I feel this in my life as a philosophy teacher. I understood Aristotle's Ethics okay when I read it the first time as an undergraduate. I understood it a bit better the second time I read it. I understood it better again when I wrote a paper on it in graduate school. But my grasp on the materials and my ability to actually put them to work on real-life examples and real-life problems was elevated to a completely different level when I started teaching the materials to students. And I tell this to my students all the time. In mixed age, so you've got a couple of freshmen and a junior, or mixed ability study groups, it is not just the less capable or newer students that benefit. The ones who already get it, or who do most of the work explaining stuff, also see significant improvements in their competency, the clarity of their thought, and the depth of their understanding. So in an effective study group, even when it's mixed age or mixed ability, everyone at the end of the day gets a better grade, including the ones who already knew the material, including the senior students, right? So it is true that not everyone makes a good teacher, and that you can be an excellent practitioner of a craft without being good at teaching, but I genuinely believe that teaching makes for better practice. I also think, and this is just a side note, that modeling good action, setting a good example to protégés, and being conscious that in everything you do in your professional life you are setting an example, that's also elevating. It sort of forces you to be your best self in your professional role. The last benefit that I think a mentor-mentee relationship has for the mentor is around humility, which is also clearly a concept that Greenleaf talks about. A vital element of mentorship and a vital element of all forms of transformative and servant leadership, in my view, is humility, which means openness to other people and their perspectives, and staying constantly aware that we're all human and frail and finite, and we all make mistakes, right? Mentoring a junior often involves consultation, so actively listening to their suggestions, taking them seriously, being receptive to their concerns and their productive criticisms, and I think it should also include the possibility of openness to being challenged or being corrected by a protégé when you make an error or when you take the wrong tack. One of the things that a protégé owes their mentor is respect. But respect does not mean automatic or unquestioning deference. Real respect for somebody means viewing them as a rational, intelligent, adult, and a professional, in a professional context, who is genuinely committed to excellence in their field. And given the background of mutual trust and respect on which a mentor-mentee or mentor-protégé relationship is built, a mentor should, I think, be able to rely on their protégés to be their honest allies, both in supporting their good decisions, to be their cheerleaders and supporters, but also to be there to point out their mistakes and to point out opportunities that the mentor has missed to do things better. Okay, there's loads more that we can say about Aristotle's theory of friendship. We haven't got into his argument about why you can't have an infinite number of friends. We haven't got into his claims that socioeconomic and political power differences make friendships impossible, which are contentious claims. But I think that's enough from me for now. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.